It sounds impossible to think that you and I could create a school out of thin air and match up against the best high school football team in the land. But that's exactly what happened. This past weekend, Bishop Sycamore accomplished this through a coach who had been previously arrested for fraud, a team of 30 college dropouts, representing a school that doesn't even exist, lying about having D1 prospects on their team, lying about the names of players on their team, playing guys on both sides of the ball, and an easily discoverable 0-6 record last season. But how does a team with this many red flags get a chance to match up against the best high school football team in the world on national television?
Bishop Sycamore told us they had a number of Division I prospects on their roster. To be frank, a lot of that we could not verify. And they did not show up in our database. They did not show up in the databases of other recruiting services. So it's okay. If that's what you're telling us, fine. That's how we take it in. From what we've seen so far, this is not a fair fight. And there's got to be a point now, Ludes, where you do worry about health and safety.
I already am worried about it. I think it's this could potentially be dangerous, given the circumstances and the mismatch that we have here. And quite honestly, Bishop Sycamore doesn't have not only the frontline players, but they don't have the depth in case something were to happen to their roster with maybe a kid or two here throughout the remaining 2.5 quarters of this football game.
It didn't take long for the commentators to recognize the legitimacy of Bishop Sycamore, as by the middle of the second quarter, they were down 30-0, and acknowledged the fact that they couldn't verify any of the players on the team. This supposed school was created in 2020, and to be honest, it really isn't even a school, as the Ohio High School Athletic Association stated after their game against IMG that it wasn't a legitimate school, and their location, roster, and practice facility couldn't be verified. Not only that, but according to Prep Gridiron on Twitter, they're a part of the Texas Christian League, despite supposedly being located in Ohio. On Max Preps, their address is 303 South Grand Ave in Columbus, Ohio, which seems legit until you look up the address and discover that it is indeed a school, just a completely different one at that, being Franklin University. Max Preps also gives us a phone number. If you call that number, it goes straight to voicemail. But through deeper research, we find that this is Roy Williams, the head coach's personal cell phone, according to Minister Andre Peterson, who seems to be in charge of this whole scam. From his Twitter, we can find a GoFundMe for the school and his personal phone number, which also goes straight to voicemail. Lastly, on Max Preps, you can find that there's a roster tab with no names on the roster, which is impossible to come by for a team ready to match up against IMG. Now that we've basically already taken away all their legitimacy and credibility through just their location, let's talk about their first season on the books in 2020. They went 0-6 with a negative 185 point differential in just 6 games for an average loss of about 31 points. What's even more strange is that this isn't even their first matchup with IMG, losing 56-6 last season. Who is giving this team games against the best team in the country in their first 2 years? And more importantly, a national televised game. Before the game even got underway, it's important to note that this game would be their second in just 3 days, putting players at a massive risk of injury, which proved to be true as their quarterback and plenty of other players went down with injuries. What makes this worse is that the buildup of the roster, which is full of players who are postgraduates and JUCO players, and at the very least older than your typical high school athletes, and due to this, had a very small group as a team, in addition to playing just 2 games in such a short period of time. This program alone is obviously short on money. As I stated earlier, the team had a GoFundMe, which makes sense due to mismatching helmets, multiple jerseys with the same number, and no road uniforms. So, who is in charge of this whole scam? From what I've read, it seems to be their supposed minister, Andre Peterson, and their head coach, Roy Johnson. Roy Johnson has had fraud and mismanagement allegations against him since 2019 and has an active arrest warrant. So this doesn't seem too out of place for a guy like him. So overall, who's to blame for this entire mess? Definitely both. ESPN should have done more research to find out that this team wasn't real. It doesn't really take much digging to put it all together. On top of that, strangely enough, Bishop Sycamore backed out of a conference call just days before their games this weekend. On Bishop Sycamore's end, they've scammed not only ESPN and their viewers, but the players and their families. This parent talks about how all negative attention about the coaches are true, and how the kids are basically 19 to 20 years old. Lastly, a former player for Bishop Sycamore was kind enough to give me some information on Bishop Sycamore and how they recruited him. He asked to be unnamed, but left me with this information. They sold me on a dream that wasn't real, just like they did everyone else's. Promised stuff that they didn't even own up to, ruined my life. I just played. I didn't do my research. They were just selling a dream. I shouldn't have bought into it.